Happy Wednesday. I was going to say good morning, but it's right on the edge here. So good day. Welcome to Second Lap. I'm Gramps, your host. Today, my mileage, 38 and something. I'm getting closer to 38.4, I believe. There it is, 38,391. That is pretty darn close to 38.4. Today is going to be a different show or a different format. We're going to try something different. We're continuing to be curious and looking to find new ways to, I don't know, either excite you or to keep you, on the path, or telling your friends about us. Like, that's really the whole thing, is how do we get more people to spend time interested in what we're talking about? And I think I'm going to sell you on my why, or at least describe my why. And then I'm going to do a little bit of, I broke things into thirds. So I'm going to talk about my first third of my life. Then there'll be a middle part or a middle third. And then at some point, maybe a month from now, keep you interested, maybe get you salaciously excited to make some popcorn and watch, Gramps Chapter 3. We will talk about, call it divorce, David Goggins, Fitbit to today. That'll be Chapter 3. And I talked a lot about that, but we will get more in depth. So today I was going to talk, and I am streaming live, I believe, on X and Instagram. So if anybody that's watching has questions or needs just a little bit more from me to lock in and hit the subscribe button, you can ask questions. And Ronnie, who's the magic behind all this, will put your question up and I'll do my best to answer. But I think the biggest reason and the why that Ronnie and I have talked about numerous times as we were on this venture is around understanding perspective, being able to show 5 people a film and get 5 different understandings and descriptions of what different people are seeing, because we all have a growth and a perspective. We blame our problems on our parents as an example. And yet, do we look at our parents as the humans, the children, the people that they grew into, and why they are the way they are, which is then why you are the way you are. So I've done all that sort of analysis on my own parents. I've watched and done that with sort of me and then their parents, and how did all of that thank you. How does it all come together? So perspective. So I looked at, as an example, my dad is the baby in his family, and his mother worked nights, as an example. And so he would, cook with her and have dinner, which was breakfast, with her. And it just brought a different understanding of why certain things were so important to my dad, why certain things, drove our family. And so I'm going to take the time to tell you sort of why I am or who I am. And that way, when you're watching the interviews between me and the guests that, we as a team have pulled in or found to be interesting people, it gives you an understanding of why I'm asking the certain question, how did I grow up? So maybe that makes sense to why I'm curious in a certain way. So I start out with my early life. I was born. I was the first born to parents that were both in their 20s. I was born in Southern California. Born a couple miles in Anaheim, basically near Disneyland. I've had a lot of people sort of make fun and, hey, did you grow up at Disneyland? And I did actually spend quite a bit of time at Disneyland over the years. I don't think it was like many times in a single year, but over years we would go when we would go back to visit family. And so far, I was going to say, I'm going to date myself. We would go when you would have to have Disney bucks. So you'd have to have this book of coupons, and each coupon was worth one of the rides. And so I think it was how they limited people to overrunning things like the Matterhorn and things like that. So But before I digress, born in Southern California, I'm the oldest of four, so I have three younger siblings, and that means I'm the oldest, and that's sort of gives you a birth order perspective of Gramps. My sisters, all three of them, so I don't have any brothers, were younger, and I had twin sisters. So I have two sisters that were born on the same time and the same day, and my parents had no idea that they were having twins until the doctor said, "Hold on, there's one more." So just kind of a funny story for me. And then I had a younger sister who became kind of my playmate, more of a tomboy. And growing up in Alaska, we lived in town, as they would say, and went to a school and rode a yellow school bus to school like everybody else. I mean, it was just like living in town. But we lived in Alaska, so town, was 200,000 people in an area of Texas where we probably have multiple millions of people. And we lived on a couple of acres in a neighborhood. All the streets were dirt once you got up the main road. So I don't know if that had to do with the snow and being able to have better traction, things like that. But just, we always had dirty cars. I guess that's where I was going with that. So I got to wash the car a lot. And we lived in Alaska until I was basically 15 years old. So while I was growing up, I played sports. My parents tried to, help me with my coordination. I guess I was, growing so fast, and it was a tall kid that I was a little, awkward. And so they put me in soccer, and I played soccer all the way into high school. And then I started playing again as an adult. So I'll talk about that in chapter 2. But I started playing soccer at 30 in an adult league, in an open league, and I went back to it. So it was a good time. But sports in Alaska, I played soccer, and it was kind of crazy. I remember playing, some of my most vivid memories are playing in the rain and sliding into, slide tackle, get the soccer ball, and you're in a 6-inch deep mud puddle. And when you're 10, 12, 13 years old, that kind of, it seems larger than life, and it was a lot of fun. Growing up in Alaska, or living in Alaska from kindergarten through the 9th grade, basically, got to experience all sorts of things, from outdoors and fishing to, we had a trailer down about 2.5 hours from where we lived in Anchorage on the ocean, and we would go down to that trailer, and we had four-wheeler around and fish and all sorts of things. I caught a 75-pound halibut when I was 14 years old. The funny story is I had broken my nose in baseball the single year that I played baseball. And so when I had caught the 75-pound halibut and we came and brought it in, the thing was 6 feet tall. It was taller than I was at the time. And the people all saw me with my broken nose and, bloodshot eyes and bruised eyes, and thought maybe the fish had kicked me in the face, but it was a baseball. I played baseball 1 year, and I caught a ball in the nose, and it was the second or maybe the first time I broke my nose. Multiple times I've done that in my life. And I didn't play baseball anymore. I enjoyed watching it. I didn't want to get hit in the face again. I was like, hey, how do you teach somebody something? Just throw the ball in the face, and once you've done that, you're not going to want to do anything else. But still in Alaska, at 14, you're allowed to get your driving learner's permit, as opposed to 15 and a half in Washington State, where I moved, and then in California as well. So at 14, they give you your permit, and you're allowed to drive around with your parent in the car. And so in preparation for that, my grandfather, who was a race car driver as a youth, put me in the Bob Bondurant School for Race Car Driving at Malibu Grand Prix. And I was able to beat a course record, or at least make a fast enough time that they gave me my license for that at 12 when it was required to be 14. So I've kind of always been doing things a little earlier than I'm supposed to. And then I started to drive my mother everywhere when I was 14. And it was back to what I was talking about earlier about washing the car. I would wash her minivan every day so that I wouldn't be seen in a dirty car. And I would vacuum it, and it was immaculate. And probably why I take my car in to have it cleaned now as opposed to doing it myself, because I did so many details when I was a youth. Um, my parents are still married today. They have been married 55 years this year. 55 years this year. Their marriage is 1 year older than me, and I'm 54. Yeah, 55 years this year. They live in Washington State, and they're still near and see my siblings quite often. I'm really the only one that's left. That's part of chapter 2, but I left being near the family in 2000, so 26 years ago, and have been off on my own and in my own location. So with all of that perspective, I'm Gramps. So I'm using the stories that I'm describing as ways that, I look through that lens. So when I see something, I'm able to, give it some sort of meaning. And so back to how we started this, the perspective that we're trying to share through these stories is, lead with love. That's one of the main pieces. It's one of the areas where I'm heavily focused. I've watched in my belief and perspective, there's too much leading with fear. There's too much, FOMO, fear of missing out. There's too much just lead with the stick. It seems like most would rather lead with the stick. Go do this or else you're going to get this, as opposed to leading with carrot. And I've always been a fan of leading with the carrot. It's been the way that I've brought that into my management style and times I've managed people, having children, having grandchildren, always trying to choose a way to show them a way to earn, that carrot or earn some sort of a behavior, as opposed to, as I said, leading with the stick. Never been a fan of that. Never has made a lot of sense to me. I had to learn sort of why and what it meant and understand it. And I think my parents were more that way as well. So, we grow up and learn from those around us. And I believe that their parents were the same as well. I don't, I can see my mother's parents, they had her later in life. So I can see why and how she sees things. Having her mom be 40 years old when she was born, as opposed to her mom be 20 years old, like my mom was. It always seemed like when I was growing up, my parents were the younger parents in the group. And me making my parents grandparents at 39, I didn't do anything to help in that situation. So my parents are great grandparents at this moment, and, are still driving and living and traveling around between a couple of locations that they put pins in the map in. So I'm looking at things as a human that's a grandfather. I call myself Gramps and go by Gramps. Have our 11th grandchild due in August. And yet I don't feel like I'm an old guy. I usually will tell people that I am 17 until I look in the mirror. And then some of the shiny stuff reminds me that I have maybe more to give back, which brings us back to the show. Love to believe that through our efforts that we can help somebody to get through a situation, to understand why they're feeling the feelings that they're feeling. I use the word feeling 3 times in one sentence. What's behind the feelings? Why are they, possibly feeling that way? We're not a therapist, nor do we we can only go to 45 miles an hour. I'm not a therapist, nor do I play one on TV. And the joke of I stayed at the Holiday Inn Express won't get us any more financial coverage on this podcast. Anyways, Ronnie, are you there? Have we had any questions? Anything? Any long walks and no asking them to. Okay. I didn't talk about walking, did I? I did find and fall in love with walking as a kid in Alaska. We did go on BLM property, and we go on long walks and hikes during the summer, and that would turn into cross-country skiing and then ultimately downhill skiing, but cross-country skiing and snow hiking and building snow forts and things like that. As a kid, I did cross-country and track in addition to soccer. And so I would say, running through the woods in cross-country would probably be the closest assimilation to what I'm doing to today, where I was, running, and maybe not at a super fast pace, but I was running through the woods, and as I said, BLM land, and we'd go on adventures that way. I know as a younger kid going on hikes with my parents, we would go and find wild berries, rose hips, and different, kind of berries that we could identify that were okay and, not going to kill us. And Bureau of Land Management. BLM is Bureau of Land Management. It is the federal government's land holdings, and I believe the organization that manages it. Thanks, Ronnie. And I don't remember. Well, I don't know how I found that out. I know we were on property and we had found. I want to say we found some munitions from World War II. With Alaska being as late as it came into being a United States state. It became a state in 1959, and World War II ended in 1945. So we found, I don't think they were spent munitions, but we found some, I believe, stuff on BLM land, Bureau of Land Management, government land, that was, stuff that was left there from World War II. That's probably the funniest or coolest story. And yeah, you threw me off with the Black Lives Matter. But that's okay. I'm supposed to be thrown off. I'm supposed to be able to duck and dive and address. I really fell in love with walking. Oh, yeah, I do blame Alaska. I blame Alaska on my love of the outdoors and loving of trees and being with nature, animals, all that stuff. I went back to Alaska. I left in 1987, we left. And I went back in the mid 90s. So 1995, 1996, I went back for when I was employed in a manufacturer's rep firm. And I covered Alaska and Oregon. And I would do Oregon by car, and I would do Alaska by plane. And the last time I went up there was the late 90s. And it wasn't as big as I remember it as a kid, because it was cute, larger than life when you're a child. And it was just the same. It felt, very much the same. So the last time I went was in the late 90s as an adult with kids and covering it for some products, industrial products. And I haven't been back since that I can think of off the top of my head. And I'm due to go back. I love the outdoors. I'd love to take Emmy to Alaska. I don't believe she's been there. And maybe do a cruise or something like that, so we can experience all of that. But yes, I do. It's a good question. Yes, I do blame Alaska on my love of the outdoors, and it's really set me up It's really set me up in my adult life for a desire for privacy. So, living in neighborhoods in Texas, by example, in the backyard, putting up trees and shrubs and other foliage and fences and ways to give myself a backyard where my neighbors can't see me. That's something that I think comes from growing up in Alaska, where our neighbors were, so far away that they couldn't even see what we were doing. That I think is important to me. So, good question, and all perspective. You had any other questions, or yeah, was that your question, Ronnie? And I believe we're still having good signal. Are you still able to see me okay? Because it'd be good if I had this as a good path for me to be able to do the podcast on from time to time, as opposed to some of those other lanes where we get intermittent coverage. I was going to talk up in that first chapter. Oh, thanks. I left Alaska at 15 and moved to Redmond, Washington. We'll think Microsoft and Starbucks. So moving from Alaska to Microsoft and Starbucks. And I lived there for 2 years, driver's license, went through driver's ed with Andy Myers, who's been on the podcast. I can weave some of the guests in. So Andy and I grew up together from when I moved there in 15 till I left at 17. And I actually moved to Southern California and graduated high school in Irvine, California. So Alaska at 15, Washington 16, 17, Southern California 18. Adaptability. Why is it that I'm able to go into a room and talk to anybody? Well, when you move and you're 17 years old and you change high school at 11th grade, there's a jam or a log in your jam. It throws you for a loop. It helps you to, that's back to Gramps. Why am I able to adapt? And it's because I was forced to as a child. I moved, as I said, in the kindergarten to Alaska. I did not talk about the fourth grade. I spent the fourth grade in Utah. So we left Alaska for 365 days, and I went to the fourth grade in Utah, and we went back to Alaska for fifth through ninth grade. So adaptability, and why you feel moving made you weep. I think it allowed me to reset. I'm letting that sink in there for a second. When I would change schools, like when I changed schools from third grade to fourth grade, in fourth grade, nobody knew me. They didn't know any of my history. I didn't have anything in the past. They couldn't look at me and say, hey, we've known this guy for a long time, and so I could be a man of mystery. And so I was able to do things like that. And remember, again, going back to Alaska in the fifth grade, we moved around in the city of Alaska. So I actually went to a different elementary school the second time when we were back. So again, the question is, does it help me to read people? I think through all of my experience and all of the different people that I got to meet, that I learned to trust my gut, like learned to feel good people and good intentions as opposed to, the occasional bad person or bad intentions. And yeah, I think it helped me with that because, as I said, I could go start over. Like I reset a couple of times. I'm calling it a reset. I reset a couple of times in that I transferred I moved to a place that was so far or different that nobody had any of the 411. There was no Google to look me up. And so I could be who I wanted to be, and I could adapt or mold and learn who, I wanted to be friends with. Like I could see people and I don't want to say I understood the term cliques by that time, but I could see the groupings of people, and I really think it's why I did so well in the Navy, because I was in an 84-man berthing in the first time I was on an aircraft carrier, and I was around all sorts of different people. And I had been growing up around so many different people and so many different situations that, I didn't understand, just the way people sort of treated each other in a negative way. A lot of times I had to learn why that was. And I think I was probably naive in some of that cases, but yes, it definitely helped me to hone in on my gut, learning to, go with your gut, learning to understand that. I think they now say it's sort of a bigger brain in your gut than in your head. And that, yeah, it was good for me to, as I said earlier, to become a better adaptable person, as well as learning how to read people. And I've been in sales for the past 35 years. And so I've used it for my living. And I think that's, I'm being funny. I'm not going to blame. I look at the history. My dad is a salesman, and all four of his kids were in sales. I am a salesman, and I think three of my four children are in sales. So I didn't ward them all off. Most of them stayed with it. And I think sales gets a bad rap. That's a whole nother podcast. Like, we could talk about that. And I think Ronnie and I have done in the podcast for his side of the house. And we've talked about sales and reading people and 2 ears and 1 mouth. And yeah, but it all comes from, that little kid, the, solo son, oldest son, was 14 years old, and my foot was bigger than my dad's, and I was taller than my mom. I was just a big kid growing into my body. And that's probably why I still say I'm 17 till I look in the mirror. But yes, having a youthful mind is important. And I had that as an example. My mom's mom, she was older when she had my mom, but she had a very, very, I'd say, sarcastic, maybe snarky is a better way to say it, personality. I can remember getting a letter from my grandmother that started off with, "I'm sorry that you broke your arm." And that was "Hey, you haven't written me a letter in a while. You should probably write me a letter." And so I've spoken fluent sarcasm since I was a child. And I think it's a gift as opposed to a negative. I think being able to bring lightness, humor, it's good for things. It's good to bring humor to humans. I don't know if that's the origin of the word. It sounds funny saying it like that. But, I look back at the court gesture as probably the role I would have had in the court. My mom has always said that I've just been super quick-witted and quick on my feet. And that's what I took into sales from my youth, was being able to read a room, as you asked, see the people, talk to the people, ask questions, make sure that there's understanding of what's going on, and then move forward. And sometimes that's with the assumptive close that, hey, we're doing this. And sometimes, it's asking for the sale. And that's one of the things that a lot of people miss as part of the requirements of being a salesperson. And that's, you actually still have to ask for the sale most times. Ronnie, I think I'm good for this chapter, unless you had some other questions or there was anybody else that had questions before we turn this off. And we may come back. Ronnie and I may do a live spot. So I'm walking a different path today. Thanks. I'm walking a different path today. One, because the weakest part of our programming is still the network. It's still making sure that this device I'm carrying is connecting me back. Ronnie's in a fixed location, as is most of my guests that come on the podcast. There's a few that like to do this, but most are for physical. And so the emphasis was to take a new route and see if I could find good signal. And I believe this has been flawless. So you may see more of this in the future. I'll say that a lot. For more than one reason. The second reason I'm walking this way is I'm walking to Target. Yeah, that's the dramatic pause, the pregnant pause that I talked with Chris Lucy about. Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. Again, I'm on my way to Target because I'm trying to see if I can buy some VFriends Topps Chrome 2026 cards that were released today. I've been to Target once today. I went at 7 a.m. when they opened. It wasn't a big deal. I'm up at 5 today. I actually overslept. I got up at 5:45. Had coffee, went to Target, had an experience. Actually used Chat GPT. It said, where in Target are the collectible cards? It said roughly, once you've entered the front door, go towards electronics and look for them there. And as I was telling Ronnie, I found some cards in that area, but I always remembered that there was cards in the front. So I went to the front and I asked the human in the customer service area that had the wireless device if he could look up VFriends Top Chrome, and we spent 5 minutes figuring out how to make the device work and ultimately couldn't find anything. But he did say, hey, go down to the other end of the store. The front of the store I missed when I came in because I came in the second door. And there's a whole section of collectible cards, so you can go check there. Then come to find out, this is the good information. I learned this from another VFriend, so I'll share. Target, nor Topps Chrome, is responsible for their product in a Target. Pause there. I wanted to say Target because as a younger human, that's how we made Target a cool place to go, is we called it Target. They don't manage their product there. It's managed by a third-party company, the same one that does Pokemon. Pokemon's huge. Everybody knows Pokemon. Pokemon is managed by a third party as well. That company comes in closer to noon to do their updates. And there were some spots that were open. So I'm walking to Target to see if I can get some Topps Chrome cards. And I'm trying to figure out, do I want to do some ripping? Do I want to rip some cards? I know Delta, who does spaces with me, he's been ripping a bunch of Pokemon cards, a few thousand in the last couple months. I've cut open some comics, and I have some Topps Chrome 2025 boxes, and I have some Topps Chrome 2026 boxes in the mail. And I think I'm going to do some ripping. So I'm trying to go back to Target because I want to make sure I have enough product to make it worth the time. So we will come back online because I'm still probably about a quarter mile from Target. We'll come back online and do a quick little film or a live at 11, whatever, if there are cards there. Big if, giant if. It's really funny. The VFriends Top Chrome location finder on the VFriends website has been crashing. Emmy's been trying to use it to help me to locate cards, and we'll see. So we will be back. But really do appreciate you listening to the first third of Gramps as we go through. I hope you subscribe so that you don't miss out on the next third, which will be the first 4 children I had, and moving to Texas, moving to Oregon, moving around. You know, I didn't stay still. I'm the child that moved around. So as an adult, that made me one of the guys that moved around because it's something I'm known for, and it's easy. I adapt. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for asking the questions that were asked. And we hope to see you next time. Appreciate you. Take care. Enjoy.